loco τον Tamala. Τι έστι τούτο?
Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the Acropolis, the shining jewel of Athens. My name is Aspasia. Though I am not originally from Athens, I have climbed to the top of its social ladder using my wit and intellect. I've even earned the love of Pericles, one of the most powerful men in the city. The mind truly is a beautiful thing. Personally, I think the Acropolis is one of, if not the, greatest place in all of Greece. Though, considering it was the project of my partner, Pericles, I may be a touch biased. The Acropolis of Athens is a bastion of art and culture worthy of the gods themselves. Within this citadel, you will find many important sacred buildings, as well as some of the most magnificent art in all of Greece. You are in for a very enlightening visit. When you're done, come find me, and we can discuss the things you have seen. Farewell for now.
The Acropolis has gone through many changes in its long history. It began as a simple rock, was settled as early as the Neolithic period, and then became a fortress in the Mycenaean period. Stone buildings started appearing in the 7th century BCE. But the famous structures whose ruins remain visible today date mainly from a period of construction in the 5th century BCE. The location of the Acropolis is closely tied with Athens' foundation myth. Supposedly, it was the site where Athena and Poseidon competed for the city's patronage. This connection gave the Acropolis a sacred aura, and it was considered the religious heart of the city. The Temple of Athena Nike was built on the remains of old fortifications from the Mycenaean era. Worship at the temple can be traced back to the 6th century BCE, but the building itself was destroyed during the Greco-Persian Wars a century later. It was rebuilt during the Peloponnesian War. Given that the name Athena Nike roughly means Athena of victory, it was likely constructed in the hopes that Athens would win the war. Unusually, the temple depicts historical scenes of battles against the Persians instead of the more mythologically inclined art of other Greek buildings. The temple's priestess was chosen randomly among the Athenians and received a salary of 50 drachmae annually, along with skins and trophies from sacrificed animals. The Acropolis was built up over a long period, due in no small part to its partial destruction during the Greco-Persian Wars. It was in the 5th century BCE, though, that the Acropolis received its most significant improvements. This period was an extremely prosperous time for Athens, both financially and culturally. With a booming economy bolstered by trade and the Lavrion silver mines, Pericles, the leader of Athens, financed a huge project to rebuild the citadel. He enlisted the help of renowned artists, like the sculptor Phidias, as well as the architects Iktinos and Callicrates. Together, they erected buildings like the Parthenon and the Propylaea Gateway. Pericles' goal was to make the Acropolis into a glorious monument to the gods and to mortal Athenians. Behind the propylaea was the giant bronze statue of Athena Promachos, or Athena who fights on the front lines. That name was reflected in the spear and shield the statue held in its hands. It was erected in the mid-5th century BCE by the artist Phidias. According to an inscription, it took 9 years to make and cost almost 500,000 drachmae. At approximately 10 meters tall, the statue was apparently so large that Pausanias claimed its helmet and spear tip could be seen from the sea near Cape Sunion, 60 kilometers away. The ornamentation on the statue's shield was engraved by the metalsmith Mies. The Eraphoroi were young girls between the ages of 7 and 11 who were in charge of special rites. A list of 4 girls was drafted by the Assembly of Citizens, from which the High Magistrate, the Archon Basileus, chose 2 to serve as Eraphoroi for the year. The girls lived in a house on the Acropolis. They were in charge of carrying sacred objects and weaving the peplos of Athena. The peplos was a sacred robe offered to Athena during Panathenaea, a festival held in her honor. The Erechtheion was an atypical temple. It was dedicated not only to Athena Pelias, but also to Cecrops, the mythical founder of Athens, his son Erechtheos, and even Poseidon, the sea god who challenged Athena for possession of the city. The temple was divided into sections. The eastern part housed a statue dedicated to Athena, while the western section jointly belonged to Poseidon and Erechtheos. Meanwhile, King Cecrops' grave was believed to be under the caryatid porch. Under the temple was a crypt that was said to contain the sacred snakes of Athena. The snakes may have had a sweet tooth because the priestesses of Athena allegedly fed them honey cakes. The Parthenon is one of the most well-known buildings in the world and an enduring symbol of ancient Greek civilization. While it is located on the Acropolis, the building is not a traditional temple. It was built by the sculptor Phidias and the architects Callicrates and Ictinus as a great monument to the glory of the city of Athens. That glory is evident in its many carvings. One of the most carved monuments in Greek architecture, the Parthenon's decorations depict several mythological scenes. These include the birth of Athena, her fight against Poseidon for the patronage of Athens, the gods' battle with the giants, and the procession of the great Panathenaea. The Parthenon's inner chamber, or cella, contained a massive statue of Athena that was considered to be one of the sculptor Phidias's greatest masterpieces. The statue was chryselephantine, a combination of gold and ivory. To justify the steep cost of its construction, Pericles told Athenians that the statue was a gold reserve, which could be disassembled in times of economic distress. The cella also allegedly contained a pool, whose main purpose was to control the room's humidity, which helped preserve the statue's ivory. Athens' treasury was located in the Parthenon, where it was believed to be protected by Athena herself. The treasury contained objects of great value, acquired from different conquests, as well as a mass of minted silver coins and various offerings to Athena. Pericles also decided to move the entirety of the Delian League's treasure to the Parthenon in 454 BCE. This was a great testament to Athens' power over the rest of Greece. The riches were divided into two parts, the Demosia, which belonged to the city, and the Hiera Cremata, which was dedicated to the goddess and only used for religious purposes.
And what did you think of the Acropolis? It truly is quite something, isn't it? A sacred sanctuary and an architectural marvel, all in one. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. You're confident enough for a test? Which two gods competed for Athens' patronage? Correct. It was Poseidon and Athena who fought for Athens' patronage. As for who won, the answer is in the city's name. On to the next question. Who sculpted the statue of Athena in the Parthenon? Correct. The renowned sculptor Phidias made the statue, which was considered one of his masterpieces. And now, the final question. Which king's tomb was believed to be under the caryatid porch? Perseus slew the Gorgon Medusa and founded Mykene, but he was not buried under the caryatid porch. Keep trying. Leonidas was a Spartan king. He would not have been buried in Athens. Try again. That is correct. Cecrops was the mythological first king of Athens, and his tomb was said to be under the Erechtheion. It seems you know much about this place. Well done, wanderer. Very well. On to the next tour.
Welcome, traveler, to the ruins of Mykene. My name is Herodotus, and I am a traveler from Hyrcanassus. I retrace the cause of various events, such as wars and great calamities. I describe what I see and record what I'm told, all with the aim of providing a better understanding of why these things occur. Look for me to introduce you to many sites. It is humbling to stand in the remnants of such a great civilization. Looking at these ruins, I am reminded that the past is never as far behind us as we think. These are the ruins of Mykene, center of the old Mykenean civilization. It was home to great warriors and heroes. In many ways, places like Athens and Sparta stand on the shoulders of its accomplishments. This tour will take you through its ruins and introduce you to its most important monuments, revealing its history in the process. I hope you enjoy yourself. I'll be waiting for you at the end of your visit.
The Mycenaean civilization flourished in the Late Bronze Age between 1600 and 1200 BCE. During this period, it was mainly located in the Peloponnese and central Greece. Mycenaeans were known for exploring distant lands. Notably, they battled the Hittite allied city of Walusa in a conflict that was believed to be the inspiration for Homer's Trojan War. But the Mycenaean people didn't only travel to fight. They learned much from their neighbors, the Minoans of Crete, such as how to write syllabic script on clay tablets. Such tablets provide evidence that Mycenaeans spoke an early form of Greek. They also tell of how great Mycenaean kings ruled over their warriors from opulent palaces in places like Mycenae, Thebes, and Knossos. The entrance to Agamemnon's citadel, or the Lion Gate, is one of the most iconic monuments in Mycenae. It is impressive for both its height and for the intimidating rendering on its relief, which depicts two lions standing on either side of a column. Unfortunately, The lions' heads, which were presumably made of a precious metal or higher quality stone, have been lost to time. The gate was most likely meant to greet a triumphant king returning home from successful military campaigns and to awe foreign visitors. The entrance to it is unfortunately, the gate was most likely meant to greet a triumphant king returning home from successful. When these shafts were discovered by archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in 1876, he believed the 6 gold-filled graves to be connected with the family of the great king Agamemnon, even going so far as to proclaim a gold mask he found within to be the death mask of Agamemnon. However, this was refuted by later excavations, which showed that the 19 bodies buried in the shafts dated back to a few hundred years before Agamemnon was even born. In fact, at the time of the body's burial, the Lion Gate and the citadel walls had not even been built yet. It's estimated that the people in the graves were members of the first Mycenaean dynasty. The graves later became a place of worship for Mycenaean kings, who raised walls to protect them. These walls helped preserve several incredible artifacts, including women's jewelry, death masks, and masterfully crafted weapons. By 1250 BCE, it was at the height of its power, and its living quarters and workshops were numerous. Houses were built everywhere, from the top of the palace's hill near the king's residence, to the slopes and terraces within the walls, to the nearby hills outside the citadel. At one point, the citadel's walls even had to be enlarged to make room for more quarters. The people who lived inside the citadel were those with high status in either the military, religious, or administrative sectors of the kingdom. This is reflected by the ceramic and metal vessels inside the houses, as well as their painted plastered walls. A traveler seeking an audience with the king. Would have first ascended a steep ramp from the Lion Gate to the citadel's summit. Here, they would have walked into the palatial complex through a grand entrance called the Propylon. Once inside, their gaze would immediately be drawn to the palace's main hall, a monumental area known as the Megaron. The vividly decorated Megaron, which glittered with precious objects and colorful frescoes in its heyday, was where the king would have received the traveler. If the king was feeling generous, he would have shared with the visitor the palace's most marvelous feature, its commanding and majestic view, which stretched from the It was in this palace where a legendary Mycenaean king like Agamemnon would have held court. According to Homer and other poets, Agamemnon led the Greeks in the sack of Troy. Stories say that he was a fearsome warrior on par with Achilles, but also an overly ambitious and arrogant ruler. He sacrificed his own daughter, Iphigenia, to convince Artemis to grant his ship's passage to Troy. After conquering the city, he returned to Mycenae with mounds of riches and a Trojan named Cassandra as his concubine. Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, was not pleased with her husband's sacrifice of their daughter. She plotted to murder her husband out of anger. The plot was successful, and, depending on the version of the story, Agamemnon was either murdered in his bath by Clytemnestra or killed by his cousin Aegisthus during a banquet.
You've completed the tour. I trust it was an eye-opening experience. Though it did not last, Mykene was a sort of precursor to what would eventually become the Greek civilization we know today. It's important we remember them, if only to avoid repeating now. What else would you like to? I appreciate your desire for more knowledge. Let us continue.
Welcome, friend, to this especially sacred part of the Olympian Sanctuary. My name is Barnabas, and I am a ship captain. Don't be fooled by my scarred eye. Though I've seen well trading and it... This place is practically vibrating with divine energy. I feel like if I look over my shoulder right now, Zeus will be staring back at me. The sanctuary of Olympia was dedicated to Zeus, king of the gods. It had close connections to the divine, as you will see very soon. I'll come find you when you're done, and we can talk about what...
This workshop was built for the renowned sculptor Phidias after his work on the Acropolis of Athens in 435 BC. He died 5 years later. This grand Phidias's workshop was located right next to the Temple of Zeus. Its structure has been... Archaeologists have also discovered lots of ancient materials in the surrounding area. The most... On the fifth and final day of Olympic Games, victors attended a ceremony where they were crowned with olive wreaths and showered in flowers. The crowns came from the sacred olive tree of Zeus, which was planted near the god's temple. A young boy trimmed the branches with a golden sickle before giving them to the Hellanodikai to turn into wreaths. After the crowning ceremony, it was time for great feasting and celebration. Pelops was both a legendary Greek hero and the mythical founder of the Olympic Games. According to legend, Pelops fell in love with the beautiful Hippodamia. Her father, Oenomaus, the king of Pisa, disapproved of their union. Having once heard a prophecy that he would be killed by his son-in-law, Oenomaus was known to challenge his daughter's suitors to chariot races, killing them when he won. Still, Pelops was determined to win Hippodamia's heart. Before the race, he enlisted the help of Poseidon, who gave him a golden chariot with 4 winged horses. Pelops was able to win both the race and the hand of his beloved, while Oenomaus was dragged to death by his horses. The start of this famous race was depicted on the eastern pediment of the Temple of Zeus. The Heraion was a temple dedicated to Hera. It is one of the oldest temples in the sanctuary, dating back to approximately 590 BCE. The structure included columns painted with images of women who won the Heraia, an athletic competition made up of running events. Every 4 years, 16 women were chosen to make a veil dedicated to Hera. These women also organized the competition, though they did not compete in it. The Heraia was unique for its focus on female athletes, in contrast to the male-exclusive Olympic Games. Hera was the goddess of women, marriage, family, and childbirth. She ruled Mount Olympus as Queen of the Gods, along with her husband and brother Zeus. Many mythological stories paint her as being annoyed at Zeus's many lovers and illegitimate offspring. In Greek art, Hera is also sometimes Hera's cult with One of the highlights of the Olympic Games was a ceremony that took place on the third day of the festival. It began with a procession of athletes, ambassadors, Hellenodikai, and Anna. The group made this sacrifice. During the hecatomb, the bones and legs of the animals were burned and carried to the top of a mound of ashes from previous sacrifices. Meanwhile, the meat of the The Olympic Games were dedicated to Zeus, and all the ceremonies and events were hosted in his honor. It is no surprise that the largest temple in the sanctuary was the Temple of Zeus. While most temples were restricted to priests, the Temple of Zeus welcomed all who visited Olympia. This openness was most likely meant to show off the gold and ivory statue of Zeus that stood within the temple's walls. The building also featured art depicting both versions of the Olympic festival's founding myth. The eastern pediment showed a scene from the legendary race between Pelops and Oinomaos. The temple's metapiece, meanwhile, showed the 12 labors of Heracles, the other mythical founder of the Games. Zeus was the god of sky and thunder, and king of the Olympians. He ruled the world from his home on Mount Olympus. The child of Cronus the Titan, Zeus overthrew his father and cast the Titans out in a great battle known as the Titanomachy. He had children of his own with his wife Hera, including Ares, Hephaestus, Hebe, and Eileithyia. He also had many children without Hera, much to her consternation, but there are too many to list here. Zeus was believed to have control over the lives of mortals, as his many epithets attest to. For example, his title Horkios made him a keeper of oaths, while Xenios was the name conferred to him as a protector of hospitality. In Greek art, Zeus was usually depicted holding a thunderbolt and sitting on a throne, befitting his position as king. The Temple of Zeus was home to the chryselephantine statue of Zeus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The statue, made of gold, ivory, and wood, was sculpted by the renowned artist Phidias. At 13 meters tall, it was as impressive looking as it was difficult to maintain. Oil was used to protect the wood and ivory from cracking and to prevent general decay. While the statue does not exist today, it was thankfully described by Pausanias in great detail, so its legacy lives on.
Hello again! Well, is... Of course! Follow me, my friend.
Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the Agora of Athens. I love this Agora. Where else could you find a common fish merchant and an extravagant jewelry seller within a few feet of each other? It's that kind of variety that makes city life so rich and exciting. The Agora is the beating heart of any Greek city. It is a place where all types of people may gather, from citizens and foreigners to magistrates and philosophers. All manner of business is conducted here, including political meetings, legal proceedings, and trade. When you finish exploring, come find me, and we can talk more. See you soon, wanderer. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
The Agora was the civic center of Athens, but it wasn't only frequented by politicians and city officials. The area housed a market where people could purchase food and other goods from merchants. It was also frequented by philosophers, who used the public space to establish schools and pass on their teachings to students. Religion had its place as well. Temples dedicated to Hephaestus and Apollo were located in the Agora, along with the altar of the 12 gods and the monument of the eponymous heroes. The painted stoa, or stoa poikile, derived its name from the panel paintings on its wall. The paintings were created in the 5th century BCE by famous artists like Polygnotus and depicted Greek military victories like the Battle of Marathon. The stoa served as a public meeting place for citizens, but it was especially popular with philosophers who used the space to pass on their teachings. In 301 BCE, the philosopher Zeno of Kition chose the Stoa Poikile as the location for his school of philosophy, the appropriately dubbed Stoicism. Trade in the Agora was supervised by magistrates. There were 5 agoranomoi, who kept order in the market, controlled the quality of goods, and collected market dues. This provided revenue to the city and helped pay the magistrates and those in charge of maintaining order. The market benefited everyone. Customers bought what they needed, merchants made their living, and city officials received the money they needed to keep the wheels of democracy turning. The original Temple of Apollo Patrous was built around 535 BCE by Pisistratos, but was destroyed by the Persians during their invasion a few decades later. It long remained in ruins, except for the altar, which was left standing as a reminder of the Persian sacrilege. Eventually, a new temple was built in the 4th century BCE. Inside was a statue made by Euphranor, the same artist who painted in the Stoa of Zeus. The temple held special significance in Athens, as it was connected to the name Patros, meaning fatherly. The Temple of Hephaestus overlooks the Agora from the Colonus Agoreus hill. Today, it is one of the best preserved temples in Greece, owing to its conversion to a church in the Middle Ages. But while this transformation preserved the structure, it also damaged the surrounding sculptures. The temple was dedicated not only to Hephaestus, the god of metallurgy, but also to Athena Ergane, goddess of arts and crafts. Nearly every part of the Hephaestion was lavishly decorated with depictions of famous mythological events, like the labors of Theseus. The Theseus scenes gave the temple the nickname Thesion, a name that lives on today as a city district in Athens. The Boulaterion was another building in the Agora that contributed to the democratic process. It housed the Athenian Council of Citizens, the Boulé. This council of 500 was composed of 50 members from each Greek tribe, all of whom served a one-year term. They were chosen by lot from among citizens over 30. Every month, one group of 50 was chosen to lead the Boulé's executive committee, the Prytaneis. The Prytaneis met every day of the month and called meetings of the full council in the Boulaterion, where they spent their time discussing bills. The Prytaneon was one of the most important buildings in the Agora, as it was the headquarters of the Prytaneis. The Prytaneis was the executive committee of the Boulé, who ran the city's daily. The Prytaneis dined in the Prytaneon, also the fire of... The Heliaia was the most important court in Athens. Judging was irregular. Heliasts were chosen randomly based on two factors. A stipend of 2 obols was established by Pericles. In the Agora, an Athenian could buy and sell many. The permanent retail market. Merchants and craftsmen who worked in the market could be citizens, foreigners, or even freed slaves. They sold with so much variety, competition was fierce. The Heliaio wasn't the only court in Athens. This other court was located next to the South Stoa. Historians believe it to be these ballots. The reason trials were so common in Athens, however, if a public trials The mint was where the city made its coinage. It is believed that Athens' mint was in the city's agora. As modern excavation, much of the silver required for minting coinage came from the Lavrion. Athens was
You have now experienced the Agora, following in the footsteps of countless Athenians. I hope the trip has impressed upon you. If you have any question, as you wish. Let's see what else Greece has in store for you.
Here, visitor, and welcome to the... Delphi is an amazing place to visit if you're looking for information. I've come here on several occasions in search of answers to some particularly puzzling questions. And sometimes, I even found them. This is Delphi, home of the renowned oracle. Greeks considered it the navel of the world. Pilgrims and kings journeyed here from all over Greece and beyond, seeking advice from Apollo through the voice of his interpreter, Pythia. During your visit, you will experience the sanctuary through a pilgrim's eye and discover how important oracles and prophecies were to the people of Greece. Now, go off and begin your pilgrimage. I will be waiting for you at the end of your visit.
On their journey to the Temple of Apollo, pilgrims walked this sacred path up Mount Parnassus. The summer sun beat down hot on their backs. Along the way, they took in the magnificent monuments, treasuries, and statues that adorned the road. These landmarks were tokens of people's reverence for the oracle's benevolence. All were dedicated to Apollo, and most were offered by cities to commemorate military victories. The monuments represented not only their donors' piety, but also their power and wealth. The sanctity of Delphi has endured to the present day, and visitors still take this very same route. One of the most impressive dedications to Apollo came from the Cnidians, a Greek population that colonized the island of Lipari, north of Sicily. The story behind this dedication is notable. The Cnidians were at war with the Etruscans in the Tyrrhenian Sea. Seeking a good omen, the Cnidians consulted the oracle, and following her advice, they successfully captured 20 enemy ships. To thank Apollo, they offered the god the same number of statues as ships seized. Next to the Naxian Sphinx stood a simple structure to display offerings from the Athenians, most of which were spoils of war. In particular, these offerings, called ex votos, the Athenians built the portico after their naval...
They'll ride through the fire they face. They carry the weight of Leonidas. The bravest they'll fight to the grave.
Once arriving before the temple, pilgrims wishing to consult the oracle had to first pay a tax. This tax gave them the initial right to approach the altar of Apollo and make an animal sacrifice to the god. But before proceeding to the Pythia, the preliminary ritual had to succeed. If the animal reacted favorably and showed signs of acceptance to the god, it was sacrificed, and the pilgrim would be allowed to enter the temple to question the Pythia.
Αλόκοτον τα μάλα.
Τραγωδοποιός έστι κλέπτης ως δια των υποκριτών κλέπτη την χάρη του έθνους. Κύκλωθεν των τραγωδών εξαπόρων που υφαίνει μια ψευδομυθία ή της συνεπιφέρει πράξεις και τραγωδία ανέρεσης εστί. Καταδικαστέ ημίν η ηθική αξία των τραγωδοποιών. Τραγωδοποιός έστι κλέπτης ως δια των υποκριτών κλέπτη.
At last, we arrive at the Temple of Apollo, where the oracle relayed her prophecies. The temple was the final destination of those seeking an audience with the Pythia, and its appearance matched the majesty of its purpose. Atop its imposing columns, the structure's pediments displayed famous mythological scenes, sculpted by the renowned Greek artist Antenor. But as grand as the temple looked from the outside, it paled in comparison with what happened within.
I will see you again soon, traveler.
Prophecies were given in the most restricted part of the temple, the Adyton, by a chaste woman known as the Pythia. Before delivering prophecies, she first purified herself with water, then burned laurel leaves and barley flour to begin the ritual. Finally, while seated on a tripod surrounded by offerings, the Pythia delivered Apollo's messages. Her words were often strange and indecipherable, and required further interpretation by the temple's priests. Despite much research, the exact causes of the oracle's behavior while prophesying are debated to this day. Myths say that while searching for an oracle who could impart their words to mortals, Apollo established a sanctuary on Mount Parnassos. Apollo took over this site by slaying its sinister guardian, the snake-like Pytho.
Your visit is complete. I hope you now understand how important this sanctuary was, and how it affected the lives of people both in the Greek world and beyond its borders. To be honest, I could speak about Delphi all day. But what would you like to do now? Of course, follow me.
Greetings, wanderer, and welcome to the port of Piraeus. Piraeus is one of the busiest, most important ports in the Greek world. Money flows through here like a river that runs all the way to Athens. Acting as a port for Athens, Piraeus welcomed merchants, goods, and travelers from all over the world. It was a central part of Athens' economy, but it was also fortified enough to protect the city's considerable fleet. When you finish exploring the port, find me, and we will talk further. Enjoy your visit. I will see you soon.
Piraeus, a peninsula southwest of Athens, became the city's main port after the politician Themistocles encouraged the development of its natural harbors. These developments led to the gradual abandonment of the older harbor of Phaleron. Piraeus's fortifications were further developed by Cimon and Pericles, along with the long walls, which ensured goods could still be moved during sieges. Piraeus was divided into three main sectors: the military port, the Emporion, and the residential area. By the 5th century BCE, it had become not only Athens' naval headquarters, Piraeus's development during the 5th century BCE attracted a large population. Many craftsmen, merchants, bankers say the population was a mix of Greek citizens, foreign visitors, and immigrants, known as metics. Most of the residents were involved in trade, but others Piraeus's One such rags to riches tale is that of Passion, a slave who eventually became a citizen. Piraeus was a demi, or district, of Attica. Because of its size, function, and varied population, it had a much more complicated administrative structure than other demes. Above all, Piraeus was closely monitored and controlled by the Athenian assembly due to its importance to the city. Within the port, there were two separate categories of trade and retail trade. The Emporion was a commercial port dedicated to trading goods from all electmi. This was an especially crucial. Common products sold in the according to taxes were After arriving in the Emporion, merchants set up sample this and these privileges. Piraeus was a deme, and as such, while most in fact they made sure, even though Piraeus would eventually develop an a commercial tax of 2%, or a pentecost. A commercial tax of 2%, or a pentecost, was placed on all cargo and while merchants were responsible for furthermore overall. The sale of grain was overseen by special magistrates. This is no surprise. According the Emporion operated on a foundation of credit and loan. Overseas Elsewhere in the Emporion were bankers and accountants. Emporoi and Naucloroi. Emporoi used the loans to pay for both the cargo and loans. However, in
You've returned. Birefs was important. If you have any questions? Of course. Follow me, Wanderer.
Welcome, traveler, to the Sanctuary of Asclepios, a place of rest and healing. The Sanctuary of Asclepios, it was here that the sick and weary came, seeking cures for their ailments. This, I hope you...
the ill and infirm came to this sanctuary to pray and offer sacrifices to Asclepios, the god of medicine. According to myth, Asclepios was once a mortal physician who eventually became a god. He had many sanctuaries across Greece, but the most famous was in Epidaurus. When pilgrims passed through the entrance of the sanctuary, they could read this inscription: "When you enter the abode of the god which smells of incense, you must be pure, and thought is pure when you think with piety." Medical steles constituted a sort of hub between medicine, religion, and the divine. They were slabs with inscriptions that praised Asclepios' virtues and merit. The inscription, the steles, outlined the patient's name. They were probably written by the sanctuary's priests. Asclepios was a In ancient Greece, religion was inseparable from rites, processions, and sacrifices. This was no different in Epidaurus, and visitors to Asclepios' sanctuary need pilgrims clean themselves in order to be pure, then offered Asclepios food like honey cakes, cheesecakes. The food was placed on the sanctuary's holy table, where it was presumably later taken by priests. After the preliminary offerings, visitors were allowed to enter the abaton, where they would hopefully encounter. Medical steles also mention that healed patients sometimes gave additional offerings to Asclepios as thanks for being cured.
Si αναγνωρίζει κάπου και τους σόφρονας πολιτικάς και άλλοι. Με τα δικαστέα είναι και αξίε το τραγωδοποιό.
Asclepius was originally born a mortal, and was the product of an affair between the god Apollo and a mortal, Coronis. Apollo killed Coronis after discovering she had been unfaithful, and ordered her body burned on a funeral pyre. However, he rescued his unborn child from Coronis's womb before the fire Apollo gave the baby to the centaur Chiron, who raised Asclepios. Over time, Asclepios became so skilled in the art of healing, he could even raise the dead. This angered Zeus, who sent Asclepios to Hades with a thunderbolt. Apollo retaliated by killing the Cyclopes, responsible for making Zeus's thunderbolts. Then, Zeus revived Asclepios, making him immortal and deifying him in the process. In sculptures, pottery, mosaics, and coins, Asclepius was portrayed holding a staff intertwined with a sacred snake. The staff is a symbol of medicine that still endures. The Epitateon was the priest's residence. As the link between patients, they were often elected into the priesthood for 1 year period. During these functions, they were usually clad in white. The abaton was built in the northern boundary of the sanctuary, where it surrounded a sacred well whose wall. The abaton was where pilgrims went for incubation, or dream ritual. Details of the incubation ritual have been described in unearthed medical steles. They were also noted in Aristophanes' play Plutos, which featured a more comedic view of the process. Incubation was the dream ritual. Incubation was the dream ritual pilgrims experienced in the abaton. After completing the necessary preliminary rituals, as they took in the smell of burning incense, the sanctuary's priests extinguished the oil lamps and asked them to sleep. Once they were asleep, Asclepios would appear. The advice upon waking up, however, if a patient was completely beyond help, they were removed from. This was to adhere to.
I see you've completed. As you can see, gods and miracles. Now, what else? Very well. Follow me.